Marita Muukkonen is co-founding and co-director of Perpetuum Mobile, together with Ivor. Marita is a curator based in Helsinki. She has curated and produced exhibitions internationally in MoMA, for example, in Moderna Museet in Stockholm, and Kiasma. Ivor is a writer, theorist, and curator, and has curated exhibitions and events like at the Manifesto in Murcia, the Arts Assembly together with Marita, the Street Art Assembly in Ekaterinburg in 2012. With Ivor and Marita, I barely have managed to talk about their work, though we have talked so much. For one, implementing this format last week in Bonn, but also because they founded Artists at Risk, which has become a crucial international infrastructure for support. Marita and Ivor and their big, amazing team bring artists that have to flee or are working in other endangering conditions together with institutions in safe places. Also, the Bundeskunsthalle has profited from their networking. Thanks for that, and thank you very much for moderating this panel, which introduction I will leave to you. Thank you.
Does this work? Yes. So, good evening, and thank you for coming, and thank you, Kolja Reichert, for the invitation, and thank you also, Angela Lammert, and a very, very special thanks to Professor Siegfried Zielinski, who basically made this entire panel possible, the entire participation in this Congress. I think it was his spark which kind of initiated this series of different participatory kind of parts in which we contribute to the now 6 or 7 day Congress. So it was great to see the Arts Assembly reactivated in Bonn, as Kolja mentioned. But I unfortunately was down with Corona only a few days ago, so we had to participate remotely, and it was still interesting to see how participatory critique can work, and how people are forced to, through a method, find a way to truly be critical, not just say it's a nice work or I don't like it or something like this, but find proper criteria for judging a work. It was really interesting to see people do it who have never done it before. Thanks for that. We hope it lives on in the valuation chamber and in other forms. But thanks again to the Akademie der Künste and the Bundeskunsthalle, also Eva Kraus, and everyone who made this possible, the technicians and so on. We're grateful to be here. We have some amazing guests with us on the panel today, and we're going to introduce them one by one. I mean, in a minute, maybe we should just name their names so that we don't just sit here with them without saying who they are. So we have next to me is Danson, Sylvester, Kahyana. Marita, would you like to continue with other names, or should I just go through all of them? And then, of course, we have Sara Nabil, who you might have seen many a time on a Berlin stage. She's been in Germany for some time, a great artist from Afghanistan. And then we have Barış Seyitvan, who's also a former resident of Artists at Risk, just like Danson is, and from Kurdistan, shall we say. So we'll be hearing a lot from them today, but just for you to have a brief introduction to our work, I think it's important to give a little background. If we could have that screen back up again, it would be wonderful. And then Marita and I will just introduce the work of Artists at Risk.
Thanks a lot also from my part for all the organizers, and as always, biggest thanks goes to the artists who are with us here today. And I think it's most clearly you will hear from them why it's work of Artists at Risk is needed, and why actually basically it's something which should spread more and more across the world, just to give safe spaces for artists who need a breather. Very briefly, it's Artists at Risk. It works in the intersection of arts and human rights. We started our work in 2013, but it's in practice, our work started already earlier with dissident artists. Both Ivor and I, we have worked as curators, but we are also kind of political activists, have worked in politics and in media. And we have worked in different geopolitical positions. In 2013, we worked a lot in Northern Africa. And as you remember, it's basically many revolutions which took place, which were sparkled in Tunis, spread to Egypt, and after that started the square movements around to Europe and also in New York. It is with different names, from Indignatos to Bolotnaya Square in Moscow, of course, is Tahrir Square in Egypt, and so on. And quite concretely, that time, we had peers, we had artists, we had curators, also art critics who were at risk. They were in the situation that they didn't know what their next step should be, where they could go. They were tortured by governments like Sisi's governments in Egypt. Basically, there were colleagues in Syria who were under high pressure. We are talking now, the panel is about political pressure. We had also colleagues in Ukraine that time who were beaten up by its right wing, actually. And that time we were based in Helsinki and worked in artist in residency context. So it was very clear that we offered residencies for those colleagues, those peers who needed a visa invitation. They needed a place to take a breather, to think what their next step could be. It was common sense to invite people to artistic context also. That when you kind of come out from difficult situation, you are not alone. You are in an artistic context, you are in a social context, you are with your colleagues. And basically at that time we started to map that is there an organization which is doing this kind of work, that we could direct these colleagues, these peers to somebody who would do it systematically. And we realized that at that time there was no organization, no institution working with artists at risk. We know the work of PEN International, which has been going on for more than 100 years for writers. But at that time, it's basically artists were not hosted by any specific institution. And as we know, and you know, as art critics as well, that dissidents of today are not only journalists, they are not only writers. They come from all the art fields. They are performing artists, they are filmmakers, they come from theater, they come from all the disciplines.
Right, and that is a change since the end of the 20th century. As Marita was saying, that I think it's an interesting factor to kind of bear in mind when we're talking about critique, that the shift that has taken place between the great figures of dissent from being those artists of the word to being those artists of the image. And it's perhaps unfortunate because there can be an element of dumbing down in the sense that, you know, if you only have the Instagram without a link that you can click, even, which is even, you know, harder to use than Facebook if you want to actually find information, you know, the level of actual background research on any given topic will be reduced. But we have to live with our times. So our times are not those of Solzhenitsyn or, you know, those writers who were well known for being dissidents of the 20th century. We live in times where the kind of big names are things like Pussy Riot or maybe Ai Weiwei or others that are visual creators. So their primary input is through the eye. Now that is important to recognize, that dissent often comes through you know, visual content, but we have to put it back into words, so to speak. And I think that's what all of us do, and make it critical, and it has to hurt if it's going to be critique. That's what I would say. So we wanted to just tell you a little bit more about Artists at Risk also today. So Marita gave a bit of a historical background, right? So we worked a lot in Russia and post-Soviet space, then in Ukraine, in Belarus, in something we wouldn't call post-Soviet anymore, and we don't want to think of it only as that. We want to think of them as individual countries with their own histories. But now the situation changed drastically with Afghanistan for artists at risk. Suddenly, we had not just individual artists, you know, Nadia Tolokonikova, Masha Alyokhina, who we worked with of Pussy Riot, or people from, you know, Iraq, or people from Kenya at the time. But now we had 450 principal artists on our lists from all over the world. People were bringing us lists and lists and lists, and we've created something called the list of lists. So the Afghan list of lists is the greatest, the longest, the most complete list of artists at risk from Afghanistan. And very shamefully, we have to say that only very few of those people have been saved. And the reason is visas. So we just can't get them visas. Our countries, the European Union, the United States, and other Western places where they would be safe are not giving Afghans visas. We'll hear a bit about that, I think a lot more about that with Sara and Nabil in a moment. But that really changed the manner of our work. Suddenly we had not just individual artists on our radar, but we had, you know, entire like social scenes. So in Afghanistan, it is basically criminalized to be an artist, not just to be an artist that annoys people in some way or another, the way the dissidents do it. Just to be an artist is a criminal offense, to do figurative art at least, or do music. But then with Ukraine, things changed once again. And this time, not only were thousands and thousands and thousands of people at risk, but they could come. Now, that's a big difference. They actually could just walk in the door. So suddenly, visas were not the issue. The European Union said, wait, we welcome this. Suddenly, the idea of solidarity was like on everyone's lips, and said, we have to help those Ukrainians, because they look a bit like us. But let's not worry about the others for now. Let's talk about Ukrainians. And so I think we should talk about that for a moment and think about the actual scale at which we had to face the challenge.
Yeah, and I think it's also, in our work, we have never experienced such a solidarity from hosting organizations. Didn't happen with Afghanistan. It was Afghan artists at risk who were applying to our program. But when Russia attacked Ukraine, the first people contacting us were art institutions, hosting institutions, who said, can we do something? Can we host Ukrainian artists at risk? So basically that was a total shift. And basically we had, before Russian attack to Ukraine, 26 artists at risk nodes around the world, from Goa to Berlin to Belgrade to Helsinki, in Schengen and non-Schengen area. But now we have more than 450 hosting organizations. We have whole national networks in Sweden, 100 residencies. We work with Goethe Institute here in Germany, hosting artists in German art institutions. Goethe Institute allocated grants for Ukrainian artists. Same with UNESCO. We approached UNESCO to ask for grants for Afghan artists at risk. It didn't happen, but now we have a program and funding for hosting Ukrainian female artists. We are not saying it's one or another, but we are using this wave of solidarity all the time to say, what about Afghan artists? What about Kurdish artists? What about artists from Uganda? We, as artists at risk, we had to work equally with all the artists at risk. It can't be one group of artists at risk which are more important than other. And that's what we are pushing. For example, we just had a meeting with UNESCO and said, okay, after 30 Ukrainian women, what about funding a program for Afghan artists? The same what we are telling to Goethe Institute now. What about next year, Goethe in exile? What about Afghans? What about Syrians? What about Kurdish? What about Iranian? And I think that's what we have to do. It's basically, we have to push, all of us, the same solidarity for all of our peers, for all of our colleagues. It can't be that there's funding for one group, but not for others. That there's visas for one group, but not for others. We need humanitarian visa practice in whole of EU to let those people at risk to come to Europe. The figures from Afghanistan, as Sara will talk about, compared to Ukrainians, it's really shameful. It's really nothing. When we started to prepare this panel, Artists at Risk hadn't got one Afghan artist at risk out, not one. Now we have it. It's after 1 year of work in Berlin, we are hosting 7, it is Artist at Risk here in Berlin. In France already earlier, but has been very slow process. But it's the same, it's not only Ukrainians, of course, there are Russian dissidents who are at very high risk. We have more than 400 applicants from Russia. We have placed 100 of them, but they don't get Schengen visas. Many of them are now in Istanbul, they are in Tbilisi, they are in Yerevan, and so on. It's much more difficult for Russian dissidents also to come to Europe at the moment. But it's basically, those are the waves we are facing at the moment, and now we are getting more applicants already from Iran and Kurdish areas as well.
Okay, just to wrap up this first little segment of introduction, Artist at Risk is run by something called Perpetuum Mobile, which is our kind of legal entity based in Finland. We're mainly, all over the place. We're in Berlin a lot. So I think it's important to understand other plans and other urgencies. We could spend, there's always going to be another one of these crises, and we're not going to solve them, right? We're just kind of, we're not going to be the welfare state for the world. And I think this is really important for us to understand, is if the job of helping all of these people lies in the hands of a few NGOs, no matter how big, it's not going to work. So what we have to understand is, what are we going to do as a society when we want to help critically minded individuals all over the world, not because they are already on the run, not because they're already, so burnt and so in danger that they have to come to, Europe, the US, or somewhere else. But how do we help them in their locations? And that's the kind of thing we're thinking about. How do you defend the defenders of our freedom of speech, of our freedom of expression? And they're doing it in their own regions and contexts. And that's something where we, as an organization, PM, Perpetuum Mobile, which runs Artists, has started thinking that we have to also defend ecological defenders, because those are the people at the real front line of the biggest crisis that we're going to face in our generation, and perhaps for the entire history of humanity. And we're going to have not just, let's say, tens of millions coming, like in the case of Afghanistan and Ukraine, but hundreds of millions and maybe thousands of millions on the move. So how do we prevent that from happening before it happens? So how do we go about, strengthening those societies where they are, not waiting for them to come here and giving ourselves a pat on the back? Didn't we do a nice job? The white man's burden bullshit like that. So we have to start thinking about, how do we help make sure that our megamoth civilization kind of can stop the damage before it's done. And I think, well, with those heavy words, we're going to try to kind of move on to some pretty seriously difficult stories. And we're going to start with our friend Danson Sylvester Kahyana, who just arrived this morning due to some crazy flight rules that somebody dreamt up, I don't know how. They had spent 2 days, or is it 2.5, on the airplane, and arrived this morning from Uganda. Marita, do you want to give a few words about Danson's background, since you worked with him in Helsinki especially?
Yeah, Danson is a great poet. He's a writer, and he's a children's books author. He's also a former member of PEN International and chairperson of PEN Uganda. I just thought that our main focus is artists, but it's recently we have been also hosting more poets, more writers. I think Danson will also talk about it. They also need more residencies, and we do host also now poets and writers within Artists at Risk, and Danson is one of them. He was 3 months in Helsinki after he was beaten up badly, came to recover. But basically, word is Danson's, and I think that his poetry will already speak for itself. So, Danson, we are really happy you made it to Berlin and you are here with us today.
Thank you very much, Marita and Ivor and my colleagues and all of you for coming to listen to us. Thank you, Angela, and your team for making this possible. I arrived this morning, and as you can see, I'm energetic because I was looking forward to this. So as Marita has said, I was attacked on 26th April this year. I'm alive by chance because my attackers had a machete. They had a machete and they cut me. But good enough, the machete missed the neck. So it caught the left cheek and I lost 3 teeth. So when I went to Helsinki, I was in bad shape. My mouth was all open. I tried to cover it with dentures, but every time I would remove the dentures, I would suffer terribly. So I decided to move around with an open mouth as an archive to the atrocity that had been committed against me. And an archive as well to the atrocity committed against many other artists in Africa, in different parts of Africa. In Africa, we have a problem. We have a problem of a leadership problem, basically. Some leaders come to power and they promise so much, like many leaders do. And after 5 years or so, they change. And in Uganda's case, the change has been much, much worse than in other countries in Africa because the president who came to power in 1986 is still on power up to now. I don't know how many presidents you have had since 1986 in your different countries, in Germany here, for example. But since 1986, President Museveni is still on power, and he has made this possible through what I call an evil genius, because he has manipulated the country in such a way that he runs a very vast patronage system. So through the patronage system, he was able to bribe the parliament of Uganda to change the constitution, to remove the term limits. And when he did that, we said, okay, there's another safeguard, the age limit. He can't be a president beyond 75 years of age. But when he was about to turn 75, he again bribed the constitution, of course using the taxpayers' money, to change the constitution. He bribed the parliament to change the constitution, and even that safeguard was removed. Now, as we speak, he's marketing his son, who is a general in the army, recruited wrongly, not through the formal strategies, promoted very, very fast. He has made it to general in the last 12 years or so, and now he's the one marketing. So we have 2 problems. First, an imperial presidency, because he behaves like an emperor. But now, secondly, a monarchy, because when he's dead, he's 78, I don't think he has the capacity to bribe God. When he's dead, he wants his son to succeed him. So that's the kind of terrible context under which we work. And I don't know why the Western world has contributed to this, because he has received a lot of goodwill from the US government and from the European Union as well, partly because of his stance of fighting terrorism. So he has been involved in Somalia, he has been involved in South Sudan, he has been involved in Congo and everywhere in the name of fighting the Allied Democratic Forces in Congo and Al-Shabaab in Somalia, putting soldiers in those countries where the American government would not. So it's part of our problem that while we cry about how terrible he is, about how he abuses our rights and so on, somehow he does some dirty work for the Western world, and that has seen him be in power for 37 years, and is still counting. So his current term will end in 2025. He will have been in power for 41 years, I think. If he's not able to move anymore, his son will take over. But if he's able to still move a bit, then he will continue until 2031, when his son will take over. This is the kind of situation that we try to fight as writers, as artists, as comedians and so on. And it comes at a terrible cost. Just to give 3 examples, Facebook has been closed in Uganda since January last year. So this coming January, it will be 2 years when Facebook has been closed in Uganda. That is the kind of heavy military censorship under which we live. More than 20 radio stations have been closed. Sometimes they are reopened but closed and so on. So when they close a radio station, it means that others is sending a terrible message to others that if you do this, the same thing will happen. Newspapers have been closed. The most critical newspaper is called The Monitor. It has been closed a number of times. But after a lot of negotiations and so on, it is reopened. But of course, it's never the same. Many writers have been kidnapped. I think the best, if I had the picture, the best summary of Uganda's situation would be the pictures of a pop star called Bobby Wine when he was campaigning last year in January. He was dressed in a helmet, a bulletproof helmet, because there were always attempts to have him killed. He was campaigning in a bulletproof. His supporters even had to buy him a bulletproof car. That shows you how terrible the situation is. You can be killed anytime. And many of these killers come in civilian clothes. They are hired thugs. And those are the hired thugs that almost killed me on 26th April 2022. And what kind of work do I do that led to this kind of attack? So I'll just do 2 poems to give you the kind of stuff that I write that led to this. Building a decaying house. The physical design, the legalist, the contractor, the executive, the porters, money-drugged supporters of the regime, the foundation, ill-intentioned constitutional amendments, the walls, farcical elections, the roof, disappearance of troublemakers, the furnishing, mediocrity in every sector. Would you love to live in that kind of house? That's the kind of house we live in Uganda and in many African countries. The second poem, another short one, is one of hope. I didn't want to depress you with 2 poems that are very sad. This one is called One Day We Shall Rebuild This Nation. One day we shall rebuild this nation by giving power back to the people, power that the rulers have grabbed with guns and deep-rooted patronage. We shall restore dignity unto our people, that they may once again hold their heads high. These people whom the rulers hold in utter contempt, buying their votes for half a kilogram of sugar a household. We shall redeem Parliament from mediocrity and make it shine again the way it did years back when bills were debated into groundbreaking laws. We shall arrest corrupt magistrates and judges and try them in the courts they daily desecrate, forever heard of justices whose rulings are neither truthful nor impartial, even where common sense dictates otherwise. One day we shall be angry enough to mobilize our tattered hopes into a lethal blow, to deal all the traitors we fought into office. One day we shall painstakingly rebuild this nation and rid it of the leeches bleeding us to death. End of poem. I will end with this topic we are looking at, criticism under political pressure. What is criticism? Basically, I look at criticism as rummaging through a sack. So they bring a sack of things and you just rummage through the sack and you bring out something. And what do you see? You speak to what you see. So when you rummage through the sack and you bring out a cloth, you could say this is a clean cloth or a dirty cloth. You rummage out and you see something else. Maybe it's a comb, maybe it's a book, maybe it's a household item, and so on. So criticism, as rummaging through the knapsack, so to speak, to discover what is there, is meant to enlighten us, in the sense that as I rummage through the knapsack and get out what is there, I speak to what I see and what that means to me. So when I rummage through the knapsack of the politics of my country, what am I saying? I'm seeing a stolen election. I am seeing a corrupt regime. I am seeing a regime that is selfish, that does not care about the country. I am seeing a building that has been built on a shaky foundation, a building that could fall any time. And I speak to this. I say, when I rummage through the knapsack, what I'm seeing is a terribly governed country. But the people in power, the ones who are badly governing the country, they don't want me to see. They don't want me to say what I have seen or to see what I see. For them, they want me to see what they want me to see. So they will try that by trying to bribe me. And we have had some of our colleagues who have lost the struggle through bribery. Because the people in power are aware of the evil things they have done. And so they want you to see the way they want you to see. And you're saying, no, I don't want to see the way you want me to see. I want to talk to what I'm seeing in the knapsack. If you want me to see good things in a knapsack, then you put there good things. Put there apples. Put there bread. Put there clean clothes. Put there clean shoes. Then I will say, oh, in the knapsack called Uganda, I see apples. I see clean shoes. I see clean clothes, and so on. And this is where the problem of criticism under political pressure comes in. Because those guys are aware of the mess they have created. So they want to do three things. One, they want to force everyone in the country to see things the way they see them. But of course, the artist will not see things the way the leader wants to see them, because the artist and the politician are competing for the same space. They are competing for the stage where we are sitting. The politician wants to the stage. He wants to have total control of the stage, but the artist will not allow him or her to have total control of the stage because they are jostling for the same space. But secondly, the politician will want to bribe the artist when he or she realizes that they cannot intimidate them, they cannot force them to do what they will not force them to do what they want them to do. They will try to bribe, and some of our colleagues have fallen prey to that. They will give them good jobs. They will appoint them to very prestigious commissions and so on. But when that fails, the politician will silence the artist. That comes in many forms: censorship. That comes in many forms: prosecution. Sometimes for very flimsy reasons. For example, they will say, you bought land and did not pay the land tax, even when there is nothing like that, okay? Prosecution. Unfortunately, these days, kidnaps as well. They kidnap you and nobody knows where you have gone. Then they create stories. Oh, he went to a brothel, he went to a hotel with a woman. They create their own narrative, of course, in order to show you as a loose person. Or he went to a hotel with a woman, maybe he has died there. Sometimes they will actually even disappear you. We have more than 1,000 people who have been disappeared, not all of them artists, for supporting the pop star I told you about. And at the moment, actually, there's a lot of campaigning for those people. Recently, the pop star was in Nairobi raising issues about those disappeared people. Yeah, Bobby Wine. He's called Bobby Wine. Even at the Human Rights Council, they disrupted the proceedings of the Human Rights Council over the same issue. Unfortunately, they will try to kill you or they will kill you. So on 26th of April, I survived being killed. But some people haven't been that lucky. Some people have been killed. I have a friend who is a writer whose husband was killed. And it's very clear that that killing was in one way or another related to the activities of the writer. So I think I've given you a brief background as to how criticism is deadly work in a tyrannical regime. If you want to know, of course, look at Russia. What kind of fate awaits the critics in Russia? That's the same kind of fate that awaits the critics in Uganda and other tyrannical African countries. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Danson, for your work. I mean, it's really, without people like you, you know, there would be no hope for future democracy or some form of that bright day that you were hoping for in your poem. And I think that we always despair because we think it's just impossible and never will work. But then those people that just don't give up, those are the people that end up making sure that one day when the time is ripe, everything changes. And that has happened. And it happens ever, you know, and again in history, that there have been massive changes, and some for the better, some for the worse. One of the questions we have to always ask ourselves is, what kind of change do we really hope for? And maybe we'll get to that in the discussion because, you know, as we know, there are problems with forms of uprisings, and they have to be presaged in our time. But now we're going to turn to perhaps a very, you know, a good example of that, because we had in Afghanistan, you know, a major change 20 years ago, in which the Taliban was overthrown and the Americans came in under the guise of human rights. Actually, there was a lot of very conservative, very right-wing, very oil industry-related professors and politicians and commentators and talking heads who said, we're just going to Afghanistan because we want to defend the rights of women. 20 years later, they left with their tails between their legs. Sara Nabil has been a very courageous woman, activist, artist, and has been from very young age, as I understand it, very much a strong person, reacting and fighting for these rights on her own. I think we should just let the audience know that you also studied political science in Kabul, so you have a background in politics as well as art and activism. And you emigrated to Germany in 2015 and started your studies at the University of Art and Design in Offenbach. And you founded, also before you left, Shamama Gallery, which was the first art gallery founded by women in Afghanistan. Today you are still the vice president of the Afghan Women's Coordination Committee, right? The National Association of Afghan Women. So please welcome Sara Nabil.
So thank you so much for great words, and thanks for having me here. Before I start, I would like to show how to say, a short film. It's I did this performance I did on 4th of May this year in Kunsthalle Mannheim, and yeah, I'm asking from the Technik if they can play this, and after this I will going to start my talks.
Technical team, do we? Ah, great.
But there isn't any sound, I don't know why. Actually, sound. Yeah, now. This artwork, it names Bodies in War, The Hair is Free. And I did this performance in 8 months ago in Kunsthalle Mannheim to have a reaction about the situation of women in Afghanistan. I think everyone knows how is the situation right now in Afghanistan and how women are struggling. So it's not right now. Yeah, it's extremely right now, but it was always the female bodies in Afghanistan. It becomes a venue for the political ideologies and also cultural conflicts. And through this, every time every government want to win power. And me as an artist and as an activist, I did this kind of artistic protest or this performance to have how to say, it's for me, for myself, it's a self-liberation, because as a woman who born in an Islamic country with a very with very high Islam structures and at the same time patriarchy. So I was always oppressed. My body and my hair was in the first things that was always, through this I was always oppressed. And it's also same, I was born in the first regime of the Taliban. As my childhood, I bring my childhood under the Taliban regime in their first regime, so 1996 till 2001. But I was lucky that I had, at least in the last 20 years, this opportunity to have a little bit freedom. It's also not the freedom that was given us for us, but we all, the Afghan people also, we work and we give also victims to, we start this fight from our own families and the societies till we reach something in 20 years. But it was suddenly in 5 days or 3 days, we lost everything, and now it's horrible. I don't know a country right now in a world that the women or the girls even couldn't go to school because they are completely deprived from learning and from all of their rights. Yeah, this was the reason that I did this performance. And I have to also say, through the right now with the Iran revolution, it becomes also a big movement that the women are cutting their hair. It's like self-liberation. Yeah, coming back from my story. Sometimes it's really hard. I don't know from where, when I'm sitting in a panel or I'm sitting in a conference, I really don't know from where I should start. Because just right now, it's so hard. I just right now receive a message. We are working right now because since they took over, the media is not working in Afghanistan. More than 50%, it's already closed with lack of, first of all, because of the pressure that Taliban have on the suppression that they are making by media, and they are not free medias. And there's also not any bridge anymore that they can, how to say, always show what's going on there. I just received right now that the Taliban, 4 days ago, they, he is this man. They just killed this man. He was a guitarist in Helmand, and his name is Shershan Naderpur, because he was active in TikTok and playing music. And before 4 days ago, they they arrest him and they torture him. Even they just took his eyes out of his head. And and now he's dead. This is what the Taliban are doing right now. But it's not from now. I'm coming from my own story. It's also difficult to deal every day with such as hard messages or the hard news from Afghanistan. So I left Afghanistan in 2015 because as an artist and as an activist, even also last 1 year, it was not easy to work because the Taliban was always visible in Afghanistan and they always make war. We had the democratic countries and we had also achieved lots of things when we are going to compare from 1996 to 2001, but there was also some problems. And especially from 2015 that the Taliban get more power. In 2015 there was a huge debate that the Western troops going to leave Afghanistan, and that's why the Taliban getting slowly, how to say, the power. And on that time, the 30% of this land, this country was in the hand of the Taliban. And that's why they make every day suicide attacks, suicide bomber. Even they did, we had a theater. The art scene in Afghanistan, it is not big, it's really small. So yeah, in last 20 years, there's lots of things happened, but not in culture and art scene or in art section. But there was something at least. Yeah, and a person was just in front of my eyes, he make a suicide attack. Yeah, luckily I survived, but I lost lots of friends. And that was the reason that I left Afghanistan, because it was not anymore for me possible to practice art, to have critique, to be really on the ground active. Because if I'm going to continue anymore, I will be, yeah, I will just survive from first attack, but maybe not in the second or the third one. That's why I left Afghanistan and I came to Germany. And I started, it was also not here easy, this process, this is uncommon process. Yeah, but I think, yeah, luckily I could make it, so I started here my studies in art and also practicing my art and also social activities. But coming to Afghanistan back, this was my, yeah, but I started art with age of 13, and I'm always saying that I was grew up with this art scene. I was active in this art scene. But today it's really horrible, and it's every time when I'm saying this, it makes me really sad, and it's for me too difficult to say that there isn't any art scene in Afghanistan anymore. The art is completely died. Every day the Taliban. So first of all, it was also, how to say, a little bit crazy that we are talking about the critique. On art critique. I think it's something very privileged and also luxury for you guys here in Western, but for us, for me right now in Afghanistan, even a person couldn't practice art, how it could be possible to make a criticism. So it's completely something taboo and forbidden. So, and yeah, the Taliban just yeah, in January, they took 2 friends of me and arrested them for more than 1 week. And no one knows what's going to happen or what are they doing. Because when they are also releasing, when the people are coming, luckily, I'm always saying with the Taliban, the best case or the best punishment would be that they are arresting and that they are giving punishment, that you're, I don't know, they are giving torture on the bad cases that you will die. They are just shooting and they are killing the people, so without any reason. And they tortured them, and luckily they just come out, yeah, with lots of, how to say, grantees. They release them, and but they are already traumatized. But still, they are in Pakistan, and the artists, most of them, as they took over, as the collapse happened, they went to Pakistan and Iran, but still nothing happened. So what I'm also thinking that we should also have critiqued the way how the world is acting to humans. Afghans, it doesn't matter, they're Afghans or they're, I don't know, from Turkey or they're from Uganda, but they are all just humans and they are paying the cost. But we see there's huge difference what they already talk about. Yeah, I don't know what should I say anymore, because since I got this news, it was just 5 minutes ago, I really not feel good and I just lost my mind. So, but it's okay. You can ask me a question, it's better, because I don't know, it's a little bit I was just jumping, so overall, yeah. But maybe we can continue the next round a little bit more deeply.
We'll get back to this. We will get back to those questions, and so sorry to hear it just happened now on stage. It's really shocking. Every one of those, statistics is people, friends, your own family, and it just makes a difference to hear the voice of somebody who went through it and who has a friend there on the ground. It makes all the difference. We have some artists we're funding right now who are in safe houses in Afghanistan in this kind of situation, and we actually communicate with directly. But we'll get to this in the discussion, I hope.
Yeah, one thing I would like to say, it's just a small amount, or a small amount of this violence that we are receiving, but there's lots of such as shits on such as violence happening that we are not going to receive this. So, and the media at all, not.
I think that's exactly what we are talking about when we talk about Afghan artists. Is basically they are individuals, they are friends, and it's also when we work with artists at risk from Afghanistan, we have been working on those lists for more than a year now. We know the stories of these artists, we get the news of their torture, they are in the safe houses, they are losing their mind, and we talk about 450 artists in this coordinated list. We have worked with Sara, Nabil, with Yama Rahimi, Mohsen Makbaf. It is all to engage people. It's nothing. Country like Germany could issue humanitarian visas for those 450 artists anytime, but at the moment, it's basically put pressure because there's a new system being created by Ministry of Interior, and we should be filling in a form of 150 questions for each artist in German, and Artist at Risk hasn't even got a permission to do it. So this is the situation where we are, and in the meanwhile, we are receiving this news that these artists are no longer alive, or if they are already in Iran or in Pakistan, they are not entitled to this German procedure because they are too safe. And of course, those artists who are most at risk, they couldn't stay in Afghanistan. And this is the situation we are working on daily basis. So basically, this is something, it's also for anybody working on the institutions, writing, this is the most burning issue in Germany we need to be talking about. And we have to put this pressure that it's basically, this process had to be speed up. Finally, I mean, it's kind of, we can't wait for this kind of news we are getting more and more. But with these words, we are kind of, it's welcoming Barış Seyitvan, who just arrived from Erbil yesterday. Barış is Artist at Risk alumni, a very strong, it's his visual artist and a curator from Diyarbakir, who knows the Kurdish art scene extremely well because you were the curator of the municipal gallery in Diyarbakir, and you worked in whole of Kurdistan, did amazing exhibitions, very important work, and of course, Barış already faced the prize for being critical, for working with Kurdish artists several years ago. He first was Artist at Risk resident in Helsinki, and then later on became the first resident at ZKM in Karlsruhe 3 years ago. And we are really happy that there are institutions like ZKM who has been working with artists at risk for many years. It's basically, and has engaged to the work because it is, as we say, that there are artists from everywhere who need safe spaces. And after that, Barış came to Berlin and continues to be really active. But Barış is basically, we hope that we learn from you the latest news. It's what's happening in the Kurdish area. We just got the devastating news from Iran, Kurdistan, it's this weekend and so on. That is basically, it's very devastating situation there also at the moment.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your inviting, and for Ivor, Marita, and Dr. Angela. Thank you very much for your coming. Please, firstly, we can watch, after we can. Okay.
So it's just the one video,
yeah?
Can you start?
Okay. Yes, I'm Barış Seyitvan. I'm from North part Kurdistan. And you know, maybe we have a 4-part Kurdistan. They cut us. I'm from north part and from south of Turkey. And I was born in Diyarbakir. It's okay? Yes. Yes.
You want to start?
Okay,
here we go.
Sound?
We have sound. I think we have no sound.
Yes. Also okay. Mikrofon. To Ivor.
Sie sind eine kurdisch sprechende religiöse Minderheit. Jesiden glauben an einen Gott, verehren 7 Engel und treten zweimal täglich in rituellen Dialog mit der Sonne. Für die Terrormiliz Islamischer Staat sind die Jesiden Teufelsanbeter. Der IS versklavte 5000 jesidische Frauen und Kinder und tötete tausende jesidische Männer. Die UNO stuft die Gräueltaten des IS als Völkermord ein. 2014 wurde versucht, mit Hubschraubern Menschen aus dem Sindschar-Gebirge zu retten. Die kurdische Peschmerga verhalf schließlich Zehntausenden Jesiden zur Flucht. Derzeit leben sie in Flüchtlingscamps im Nordirak, aber auch in Diyarbakir, der Heimatstadt des Kurators.
Zuerst haben die Bewohner von Diyarbakir den Jesiden Zuflucht gegeben. Dann wurde mit Workshops in Ateliers versucht, vor allem den Kindern zu helfen, ihr Trauma zu überwinden.
Barış Seyitvan war im kurdischen Diyarbakir als Kurator in der städtischen Sanat-Galerie tätig. Vor 3 Wochen wurde er gekündigt. Die Entlassungswelle in der Türkei macht auch vor kurdischen Künstlern und Kulturschaffenden nicht Halt.
In den kurdischen Regionen der Türkei ist kulturelle Arbeit derzeit nicht möglich. Nach der Zwangsverwaltung vieler Städte durch Ankara wurden 3 Galerien in Diyarbakir geschlossen. Auch Theaterschauspieler und Musiker, die von der Gemeinde beschäftigt wurden, hat man entlassen.
Barış Seyitvan versucht seine Arbeit in Europa fortzusetzen. Derzeit führt er Gespräche mit Galerien in der Schweiz, in Schweden und in Frankreich, um auch dort auf das Schicksal der Jesiden wie auf die Situation der Kurden in der Türkei aufmerksam zu machen. Beim zweiten Versuch hat es geklappt. Der kurdische Kurator Barış Seyitvan hat ein Visum von den türkischen Behörden erhalten.
Yeah, this video from 2007, I created one exhibition in Vienna, and our friend also, he went to Shanghai and he took a photo about Yazidi culture. But after war, 2016, yeah, he went there again, and then he took a picture after war, and then he prepared 1 book. And yes, I'm from Diyarbakir. I was working in Diyarbakir Municipality Gallery and Municipality Culture Center. And 2015, they start peacetime between the Turkish government and Kurdish guerrillas, and also HDP also working for peacetimes. Erdogan also, he went to Diyarbakir and he say Kurdistan. And after this time, 2015, I opened 2 exhibitions about one from Kurdish artists and Turkish and different artists. Also, we invited 250 artists. And we say Kurdistan for this exhibition title. And after I opened another exhibition about the woman in the prison, Diyarbakir prison, in 1980 times. In 2016-17, they arrested me in Izmir, in Izmir, because after this exhibition, the Islamist groups, they attacked the gallery because we opened the exhibition about Kurdistan. They said you show the burqa, for example, because one artist, he showed the Kurdish woman in the ISIS, they sell the Kurdish woman in Bazaar in Mosul. But in Erdogan, to all Turkey, they attacked our municipality because they say you show very bad in burqa. Why you show like this? Also, they attacked the gallery. And then I went to Izmir, and my municipality, they sent me Izmir. She said, no, she is in prison also. And she said, you need to go outside the Diyarbakir because they attacked you. And 2018, 2018, I came Helsinki because they arrested me, and then they start my politician problems. And the artists at risk, they invite me for Finland. But in this time also, when we prepared the exhibition, because before the 2016 they attacked our municipality, they closed all art space in Turkish government because we win 65% in municipality, 85% in municipality. People give us vote and they choose the Kurdish mayors. But in 2016 they closed all municipality and they put all mayor in prison, and some mayor also they came to European country. And also the culture center, the TV, Kurdish TVs, Kurdish journalists also, and Kurdish cartoon channels, for example, in Akademie also, theater, the conservatoire, they closed every culture center. And also I was created coordinator to art gallery in Diyarbakir. In one gallery also they changed like mosque, and another one also they closed, like they used like Kella. And 2 years ago I learned, and they burned all of my archive in Diyarbakir municipality gallery archive, because 90 times a lot of the people, they can't working about the art because people, they singing only house. They can't make a theater. For example, when we prepared our theater, one theater, we need sending our text for police. And police, they looks the old theater text, and then they gave us, they say, for example, it's not, we're not writing this text in Shakespeare, for Moliere's text, they changed all text, and then after that, the police, they came the theater and they shoot the camera with 2 cameras, and they are looking, and we use this sentence, we don't use the sentence, for example. And every time in like this situation, we survive it. But this surviving not only for Turkish government, because we're surviving for radical Islamist government, we're surviving for racist government, we're surviving for imperialist governments. Every time we survive it, because not only Turkish part, not only South Kurdistan. In South Kurdistan also, you know, maybe the thousand people, Saddam Hussein, they killed with chemical bomb. And you know Rojava, you know Syrian, north part of the Syrian also. A lot of people, 13,000 Kurdish guerrillas and YPG and YPG's militants, fighters died. And now we are looking the Iran also. We have another problem in Iran. But 1 week ago, the Turkish government, they attacked the Rojava. They attacked the Kobani, they attacked the Kamishlo. Because why we are fighting with the ISIS? Why they don't, for example, they don't support us? Because the people, yes, when we're fighting with ISIS, all people, they say, yes, Kurdish people is very good, they fighting with ISIS. But today, Erdogan killed the Kurdish people in Rojava. Today, the Iran government, they killed the Kurdish people in Iran. Now in Bokan, in Sananda, in Mahabat. But Jina Amini, not only one woman. They killed Jina Amini because Jina is Kurdish. Because in Tehran, when the Kurdish people talking Persish, the Tehran government, the police, they know they are Kurdish. Jina not only like woman, Jina is Kurdish woman. Because they killed Jina for this problem. But all people now, they surviving, they fighting, they attacked very hardly the Iran government now. They killed nearly 700 people in Iran. For example, they killed women, they killed children, they killed artists. Now they want hanging a lot of Kurdish people in Iran now. But this, yes, not only in Rojava, in Iran also. In Turkey also we have like this problem. 15,000 members of the HDP in Kurdish legal party now in the prison. 1,000 Kurdish people in a European country. Now 1,000 journalists now in the prison, and artists in the prison. But every time, in not only one part of the Kurdistan, every time we're fighting with this imperialist, this Islamic governments, for example. But yes, and the people also this now, and yesterday I came here, but yesterday, for example, 2 days ago, and the Iran attacked also South Kurdistan, for example. And 2 weeks ago, the Turkish government, they killed 17 guerrillas with chemical gas. But the people, they don't think, they don't talk about these things. But yes, we fighting every time with these governments. And yes, but we don't have any, the people, they don't want seeing our surviving. But art for artists, when we are talking about art, for example, we have an exhibition in Poland today. In a lot of Kurdish artists, for example, they applied for the visa, and for example, Polish government and German government, they don't give the artists for visa. The artists, they don't want came here for living. We don't want came for living, for example, we like our country, but we can't stay, for example. The people, they came here for art. They want coming here for exhibition, but they say you can't, because when you are coming here, maybe you can't, you don't want, for example, go back in Kurdistan, for example. And this problem, because for not only for everything, for politics, for artists, we have like this problem. Sorry, I want to say a lot of things, but we don't have enough time. Thank you very much. Sorry.
Well, thank you for that emotional and strong political plea to allow artists to express their vocation, their mission in life, to be able to express themselves also on the stages of Western cultural institutions. And I think this is what we do. We don't see ourselves at Artists at Risk as saving people. We see ourselves as working with colleagues. We're working with people who are like us, just like us. We're curators, artists, critics, and so on, who are in a really bad situation and who still want to continue to be critics, artists, curators, philosophers, thinkers. And I think this is how we have to start really changing also the mind of the public when we talk about why we need to have a humanitarian visa for people who really stick their necks out, like Sara, Nabil, right? Like Danson and like Barış. I think this is where we have to start thinking about why we're doing what we're doing. It's not to say we're going to help some poor people far away and, you know, there's a lot of them. That's the general Western position. We're not helping a lot of people far away because, well, poor them. We're helping them because it can happen to us. And it happened to us before. It's not so long ago that many intellectuals and artists had to flee this country, right? And they all had to leave, and somebody helped them, and somebody received them, and somebody organized a conference for them, and somebody put them on stage, and somebody heard their philosophy and their films. So what we're doing is exactly that. And if we don't help those people and work with them as colleagues, as peers, then we won't have the world after to come. And so I think this is, thank you so much, Barış, for expressing yourself so emotionally and strongly. Thank you for that. I think we should now kind of turn to more open format of discussion. We would like you to join us. So I'm sure there are quite a few ideas and feelings and thoughts in your minds. So please just, you can come and express them anytime. We're going to start with a few questions ourselves, but please just join the round.
Are there any questions from the audience at this point, or so it is going? I think it's all of you. You have kind of you continue working with your colleagues and peers like Barış. You are very engaged working with it's this Kurdish artist Danson. You went back to Uganda. Sara, you are working with your colleagues and peers, and also with Artists at Risk. And we are here now in Akademie der Künste. I think it's very good to think it's what institutions like this, what critics, how people can actually engage to this type of questions practically. We often talk about things in metaphoric terms. And I think that that's kind of the core idea of Artists at Risk, is that we try to act concretely with our peers and colleagues when they do need support. And it would be great to hear kind of your ideas, how your colleagues and peers can engage supporting its people in Afghanistan, in Kurdistan, in Uganda, in kind of its African context and so on. That what do you think? What are these ways to engage to this type of work?
Thank you very much. In Uganda, because I mean, when people saw my toothless mouth, they were terribly scared because they did not want to suffer the fate I had suffered. But when the attack happened, I was teaching young people how to write, lawyers. I was teaching lawyers how to write. I had 7 lectures with them on how to use writing to amplify their legal training. So as a lawyer, how can you stand up for people's rights and so on? The attack happened when I had given 4 of the 7 lectures. And the challenge was, should I continue with these lectures or should I not continue the lectures? You will be shocked that my colleagues and my family members were the biggest handicap I had, because they wanted me to stop, you know. My wife said, people were telling my wife's friends were telling her, you know, if he continues like this, you're going to be a widow at a very young age. And so they make you feel like it is unethical of you to build for the future, because by building for the future, you're going to leave your children as orphans, you're going to leave your wife as a widow, and so on. So I think the kind of support we need is, you know, making the young people realize that this kind of work we are doing, we're not doing it for other people, we are doing it for ourselves, because the future is not tomorrow, the future begins now. So those students, they wrote poems, you won't believe. They wrote poems to me saying, you will be well. This has happened. One even quoted Rumi, that it is through the wound that the light enters the soul. So when I saw the support and the courage, I asked them, but you're writing these good things. Are you willing to suffer the fate? Are you ready to suffer the fate, should the fate come to you? And they all said they were willing to suffer the fate. So we finished the trainings, 7 of them, and we published the book. The book is called, I Promise This Song Is Not About Politics, but the whole book is about politics. So I think the kind of support we need is, how do we empower, as Ivor said, how do we empower the people, the young people, to actually fight the battle so that they don't have to come to Germany? How do we empower them in Uganda and in Afghanistan, and of course in some places like Afghanistan, and as Basil was saying, it is impossible. They will be killed. And that's also the ethical challenge I have when I'm teaching them how to write. Am I teaching them how to get killed? You know, I'm also teaching them to be responsible, to ensure that the decisions they make are not reckless decisions. 2 days ago, I was in a refugee camp. Again, teaching the refugees, I say, being in Uganda as a refugee does not make you less of a human being, does not take away your rights. So as a refugee child, how can you use writing to demand to be respected as a human being? You're a refugee in Uganda, but you're a national of your own country, and you must not let anybody take away your right as a human being. And I was teaching them this, and I was telling them again, you know, through my writing, I have lost some teeth. Please ensure you know what you're doing and avoid to be killed, because it's not, matters don't contribute to the well-being of people in the short run. Eventually they do. We celebrate Martin Luther King and so on, but in the short run, it did not happen. So if you can help us to do more and more of this work back home, that would be very, very nice. Thank you.
Yeah. One of the considerations we have is really, you know, how do we help also within the region? So some people argue that it would be beneficial to move people within the region so they don't have to be so far away from their struggles. And so that's something we have to consider. But then we have the European problem that every European fund practically, except very few that are more development oriented, so-called, are just interested in funding themselves. So, you know, I mean, I don't want to diss Helsinki City, which, you know, gave us the money to start our work, but you can't spend Helsinki City money outside of Helsinki. And you can't spend, you know, Nordic culture funds outside of the Nordic region, and so on. And even the European Union, you know, we have a grant from the European Union, but there's something called third country costs, and they have to be under very tiny little barrier. So our systems of funding are designed to keep the money at home. And so it's harder for us to fund regional relocations, which might be really the way forward. But thanks very much. I think you also raised this issue of self-censorship. We should get back to that. But would one of you like to respond to this question Marita asked about what we can do?
Yeah, I would like to add actually lots of things. What I'm seeing right now, we have really big similarities, but in the same time, there's a huge difference. When we are talking, for example, about Afghanistan, so the political pressure, but in the same time, it's not only political pressure, it's not only, it's while the Taliban, because the Taliban are terrorists and they are a dictatorship, but according to their law, practicing art, it doesn't any place according to their law, according to their ideology, and art is taboo, and there isn't any place to make engagement or to, how to say, to find maybe another way to at least practice art in the society. So it's completely different issue. So because under the dictatorship, yeah, you have the dictators on the government, and you know there is some consequence if you're doing, how to say, against them, but it would be not so brutal and what, for example, these terrorist groups are making. So that's why it's so difficult. I'm always thinking that how, okay, there's two narratives, what always the Westerns, last time I'm joining lots of conferences and they have just two narratives. We can't evacuate 38 million people from Afghanistan, and we can't also not recognizing Taliban. But it is not just this two narrative. We shouldn't see it only black and white. Yeah, I'm also agree. We couldn't evacuate 38 million people, but we are not talking from 38 million. Everyone is right now in Afghanistan suffering. No one have only, even they are right, even the men, we are talking always about women. Yeah, the women all completely, their existence in this society is completely deleted or they completely erased. But the men also, even they couldn't wear what they want to wear. Also the men are struggling. But in the same time, yeah, we shouldn't see just black and white, but we are talking about the people that they are really in a high risk because there isn't any place for them to, yeah, as I said before, with another kind of governments, you can at least, how to say, make, to practice a little bit, to maybe you change your place, to do underground and work, but with such a so brutal regime, yeah, I don't know how to find a way to at least work, because lots of people still in Afghanistan, there are some people, they want to work, even they want in this horrible time, practice art and standing against this regime, but I couldn't say anything for them because It's about the life or death. And for me, yeah, I accepted it as I start my work or the activities. So because fighting death is with, but I can't say anything, or I can't even, I didn't give this permission myself to say for them what they should or not, because it's their life, it's matter of life. It's death or life, and it's not funny, it's death. So that's why I can't say anything, and it's really difficult with the context of Afghanistan, engagement, and to find any way at least to do something there, yeah. And we should, yeah, at least these people should evacuate it or come out from this
Yeah,
situation.
they should be entitled to humanitarian visas. They are targeted at social group. It's so clear, and it's nothing for EU. We talk about some thousands of people who are at the highest risk. And that's something that we worked for 1 year, and now we are hosting 6 artists in Berlin from Afghanistan, here in Germany, numerous lists pushing. Now we had to fill in the forms and so on. So we really need political pressure on the German government, other governments, and EU government just to get artists at risk, it's human rights defenders, journalists, those at most risk out, so that they can return when the time comes and build democratic societies. We can't lose them.
I think that, I mean, this is really important, and we keep hammering away at that, and please don't forget that when you leave this room is humanitarian visas. We're pushing for this not only as artists at risk, but Amnesty and Protect Defenders and many other big organizations are doing the same. Artists are human rights defenders, and human rights visas should be possible on a European level. But I wanted to just think about for one second about something we can do as us, like our level. What can we do? Well, right now there's a proposal for kind of like an equivalent of the Contemporary Art Museum to be founded in Germany or in Europe for Afghan artists. So there are these kind of, museums in exile that we can support, right? There are kind of orchestras in exile, there are governments in exile too. There's journalists, redaktionen, the whole like Doj TV from Russia is in exile as a whole editorial board. What do you think of that solution?
I would like to also, I just thought that maybe I will come to in the next, okay. Yeah, I would like to also say one thing very important. So it's, first of all, we are talking from 2 groups of people. Those who are already in these countries, that they are under the threats and the danger, and those who already evacuated or they come to in a safe country. For example, I'm talking from Germany. I'm always asking from some programs for them, because I went to this integration program here, and I know how there's lots of problem, and it's not working for all. This not integration, not migration, integration. And because they are putting all the people in just one, in one top, on it doesn't. That's why you see any result. And these people, those who are already come in these countries, especially artists should be remain as an artist, and they shouldn't go to find another job or to make other works than how they can practice arts. And that's why they need also some programs to, I'm always saying supported programs for the artists, that they should practice art to work from here and from, I say, diaspora, to have also some effect on this society, those who are coming. Yeah, but exile, it's also, we couldn't make also everything in exile. Right now I'm hearing also even from, I'm talking from Afghanistan context, they make the parliament in exile. In some cases it's good, and also it comes the question how effective and how is your opportunity and which kind of framework you're working. Is there any place for you that if you're going to, for example, I'm talking from myself, if we are going to make an art center or something from Afghanistan here in exile, what does it mean? Is it effective, or what exactly we are working or that want to work here? Because why we are not, I'm always for decentralization. There's lots of here institutions, there's lots of galleries, kunsthalles or museums. Why they are not trying to work or connect them with these? It would be more effective in somehow, but in the same time, I'm always thinking, so what could be more effective? Because effective and auch sustainability is the most important things.
Sara, it is kind of, that's something we are calling for. We are calling for hosting institutions for Afghan artists at risk in Germany right now. That's something we are working on. People would get out of the refugee camps, and that's exactly what you are saying.
Yeah.
It's basically if each institution hosts one artist, that's enough. It's basically, it's a huge network of institutions here. We don't need more. They can fund one Kurdish, one Afghan artist at risk, and so on. It's not much, it's nothing. For most of the Kunsthalles, for most of the museums, it's a budget issue. We just need more hosting organizations. They open their doors for Ukrainians. They can do it for others as well. It's not a problem, but it's Barış. You have been quiet for a long time, so we want to hear your voice.
Yes, really.
And there's a question back there.
Yeah, and this, when we are coming here, is also the Kurdish people, when they come here, and we are talking about the language. We say, for example, why, for example, in Berlin, the people, the municipality, Rathaus, why they don't use the Kurdish language. And when we are talking with our friend, they came here before, we say, why? They say, because in government, they say, Turkish part, they know Turkish, and another one, they know Persish, another one, they know Syrian, they know, Syrian, South Kurdistan, they know Arabic. But why we can't use the Kurdish, for example? We have a big community, for example, in Berlin. We have 100,000 Kurdish people live here. Because we can't use, for example, a lot of things here. But in European country also, we can make something. For example, we want, we are discussing for one Kurdish culture center, for example. But the people, they forget their culture. The young generation, they don't know their culture, for example. But I know that some German friend also, they say, when they are talking with me, they say, we love people like they live their culture, for example. We don't want, for example, yes, we are here, but also we want our culture here. Because, for example, last hour we are talking also about the museum. We can't open museum in our Kurdistan. Because in Kurdistan, when you open museum, every time for example, we are thinking, when they attacked our museum, when they attacked our archive, for example, because ISIS attacked archive and Turkish government, they attacked our museums, they closed museum, in Iran also like this. In Syria, we don't know what can we do for future, for example. And here, what can we do? And I went to Iran and South Kurdistan. I saw people, I make one workshop with 20 young, 20 years, 21, 23 students, for example, from Mosul, from Baghdad, from different part of the South Kurdistan and Iran, Iraq. Because their eyes smiling. They want to change something. And we want to change something here. We want to make something for these people. But we are not. Yeah, we are here, we are safety. But not only this problem, this is important for us. We want to make something for our friends from Kurdistan, our friends from Afghanistan, our friends from different part of the Middle East and different part of the world, for example. But we need to start make something together. But not only Kurdish people, not only Afghan. We need working together. We need change something together. And this time we can show our force. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And maybe I can talking after. I want to say,
yes,
really, Jin Jian Azadi. Yeah.
There's one question from the back. Can we have one question just before we finish? We're already long over time, but I beg the organizers to forgive us, but we'd like to hear from the audience if possible.
Ja, eines wird ganz offensichtlich sehr sichtbar. Also nach diesen interessanten Statements einiges.
Oh yes, after these very interesting statements, something is becoming visible clearly. The structures of representation in the West, in Europe, are massive here.
And from the back, there was a comment. Yes, over there, way back there.
I hope you don't find this question strange. How do you decide if someone is an artist or not? do you have any criteria, or maybe put in another way, have you ever had the case that you had to reject help because you don't take this art for serious, for example?
Okay, that's really easy to answer. So we have many applications that we have to reject, but most of them not for this reason. Many we reject because, you know, I mean, not that many, but there are fakes. There are people who just want a red carpet to a nice residency in the West. And they're not at risk, they're not political, they're not engaged. Sometimes they're extremely well-known, high-profile artists in their countries of origin and just published a book with the Iranian regime. And they want to have a red carpet to Paris. And, oh, after Paris, I wouldn't mind going to London. And then after that, I would like to go to the south of France. No, we don't take those kind of people. But in terms of how we determine who an artist is, it's quite straightforward. It's not about a degree, but it's about the way in which you've dedicated your life to that. So the large part of your life has to be about living as an artist. And that's pretty quite easy to say and tell. We have area specialists that speak the languages of the regions. So we have people who speak Farsi, we have people who speak Arabic, we have people who know, you know, Russian and Ukrainian and so on. So we do just check. We have background checks. That's a large part of our work.
It's also important here, there's a question, just to comment shortly that in many countries, silenced, oppressed artists, they don't have a luxury of study art. For example, we host some amazing kind of female artists from Iraq and so on. They could never study art, but they are amazing artists, and when they get out, they become, it's very strong in Europe, where they can express themselves.
You're thinking of Khalud Hawash from Basra, I think.
Yeah.
Please.
Ich werde das jetzt kurz auf Deutsch machen, weil
Right, I'll do this in German because the question was how can we support those people who are here? And I think the biggest problem is that those people who are persecuted because of the geography, it has always to do with political art, but the German scene is looking for people who are political or not, and I think that's one of the biggest problems that the art culture implies here, because, for example, the Kurdish language is being politicized, and this is not the question that we want to ask, how do you differ between who's artist or not, but we want to put what the problem actually is we want to put all of the people into one drawer and make them the same and consider them the same, and that's actually the problem. And that's why German politicians can say, oh, well, we got people from Afghanistan, and that's why the government can say that, because it's actually
issue. Yes, often
that's the problem.
Artists are then forced into, you know, being like the artist from this country doing political work, and we don't want that. And it's very important, for me at least. We have a concept of, so we have a very long discussion, Marita and I, for over 10 years about what kind of and we call it pluriculturalism, we would like to see. And so it's not about creating these Bantustans of small cultural ghettos, sorry to use the word, right? It's about trying to find a pluricultural dialogue in which we treat each other as peers, and we learn from each other and become something new. It's not that the artist has to come here and become like a good German Leitkultur, German cultural artist, but it's also not that they should just archive their own traditional culture. So it's something about adapting to one another and learning and creating a new form of art. And I think that's what happened in Paris in the 20th century. That's what happened in New York in the late 20th century. And it could happen in Berlin today, because there's so many incredible artists here.
And I think that's kind of what our way of hosting artists or curators is based on, like Barış first arrived to ZKM and worked there as a part of the curatorial team and so on, because they are peers, they are professionals, and it exactly means that also whatever Finnish theaters, they have to change. And basically that's how we work. If there's a professional theater director, dissident Russian coming, he should be able to have his script staged in a theater in Helsinki. Same here, and so on. that they don't have to go through and struggle this kind of establishing themselves. Therefore, we are calling kind of art institutions to open themselves and host artists and start this dialogue. It's very simple. Just take artists to be part of your teams.
I think that's a perfect closing word. I can see the organizers ready to jump onto stage, and thank you all. And we'd like to thank them again. Thank you to the organizers. Thank you very much.